There she has it. People will join as we come along. And I see a lot of names here who are visiting that I am not necessarily aware of, so that's good. We got some new people coming in. My name is Lee Pomeroy. I am chair of the South Central Minnesota Clean Energy Council. And we do a monthly forum on the second Friday of every month, presenting issues in clean energy, energy efficiency, and climate change. Thanks to Zoom, we can go beyond our immediate area and bring in people like Jukka, and in the past, Alan Warnke, who's also on, to enlighten everyone within our network on issues on these issues. I want to thank, before we get going, Karen Stoll of South Central Service Co-op and the South Central Service Co-op, which is a nonprofit agency that helps local governments and school districts in administrative tasks. We are not going to do a forum in December. It gets to be pretty busy then, but we will do one in January, and that will be announced. So without further ado, I want to introduce Jukka Kukkonen. As I say to people, who's Jukka Kukkonen? Mr. EV of Minnesota, and maybe even beyond our borders. And he can tell us a little bit about himself and then launch into his presentation. Now I'm going to ask Karen to turn off everybody's mics except for Jukka's and mine, and then as people want to get on, they can turn their mics on and participate when it's time for questions. And the chat is open. If anybody has to make any comments, they can add it to the chat for now. Jukka?
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. It's good to be here today to talk with you about EVs and all the tax and incentives and all the cool things that are happening right now with all of this. So I will start by sharing my screen here so you can see my slides. So you should now see my slides there on there. And I said, my name is Jukka Kukkonen. I'm Chief EV Educator and Strategist for Shift to Electric. That's my company. And this presentation today is sponsored by Fresh Energy, that is clean energy advocacy organization in St. Paul. And I would like to welcome everyone to EV Decade. That's what we are living right now. We are in era here where we are moving away from internal combustion engine and to electric vehicles. And if you're not driving EV yet, I would recommend start driving soon, because sooner or later you have to do it, and sooner you do it, better for you and everyone. You'll be enjoying it much more. So hopefully you get some more information that helps you in that decision today. So let me just change the slide here. There we go. So my job is to stay on top of what's happening in the market. So I try to understand how is this EV market developing, where is it going. I've been working with this for over 12 years now, and being involved with many different things. I work with the utility companies, manufacturers, and others. And some of the things that I've done in the past, I've worked in quite a bit with figuring out what's the best strategies for condos and apartment buildings, charging on that side. By the way, if you nowadays want to learn more about it, talk to Alan Warnke, because he's focusing on that specific area. So he's a good resource to talk about that. I've also worked in the workplace charging area, and we have a new program that we're starting, a nationwide program about electric vehicle charging at workplaces. So working a little bit more on that. I've coordinated the Minnesota EV owners, which we started in 2012. We had 50 people when we started. Now we have over 3,000 members. So one of the biggest and most active regional EV owners groups in the US. And basically what we try to do is just whenever someone is putting together any kind of event and they want EVs there, they can just get in contact with us and say, hey, we have this event coming up. could you potentially provide some EVs here? And then our members can say, yeah, I can go there, or I can go there. And then we might have 5 or 6 EVs there, and the owners just talking with people about their experiences. What is it like to own, charge, and drive EVs here in Minnesota? And that's the best way to really learn about the topic overall. I'm also EV market expert at Fresh Energy, and I mentioned that already. Check out their great work. And I teach EV marketing technologies at the University of St. Thomas. I teach a fall course for graduate students, and we are now over halfway through our course. It's always a good experience, and every year it just becomes more clear that these students are so good opportunities to find ways to use their skills and their expertise to build new solutions, because we need a ton of work in energy area overall. EVs are one part of it, but the connections to the grid and charging and renewable energy and all of that, when you put all of that together, there's a ton of new solutions that we need. And it's great to work with students to help them to learn enough that they can figure out how to do this. So that has been very good. A little bit about where the market is right now going. We have seen a very healthy growth on our EV sales market this year. That has changed quite a bit from past, where we have been pretty stagnated. In 2020, EVs had 2% of market share in the US. In 2021, it was 4.1%, the market share. Now, this year, right now, we're sitting at 7%. So that's pretty good growth there. At the same time, the growth could be much faster. And that's our challenge right now, is the availability of the vehicles. If we would get more vehicles in the market, these numbers could easily be double where they are right now. There's no question about it. We have seen this in Europe, where the manufacturers actually have provided much more vehicles in the market. There, the growth has been very strong. So, for example, my country of origin, Finland, was in this 2 to 4, 5% level in 2019, and now they are, last month, I think they were 40% of the sales EVs. In Norway, they're over 90%. Most of the European bigger countries are between 20 to 30%. So it has been very strong, and it's kind of telling that and why we are seeing strong growth there is mostly because manufacturers have provided more vehicles into the European market, because Europe has more robust emission standards, which means that the manufacturers have to provide EVs into the market in bigger numbers for them to even sell vehicles in that market. And manufacturers used to be like, well, I don't know if there's enough demand or if there's enough charging infrastructure and all of that, before these emission standards came in place in 2020. And then when they started to provide the cars, they saw that, boom, the whole market just took off. They learned very quickly that there was plenty of demand, and therefore they are actually prioritizing right now the European market in many ways. Well, one example of this, how this affects things, is, for example, Volkswagen has worldwide sold 500,000 electric vehicles in the last couple of years. 500,000. In US, they have sold 30,000. So that's a pretty small percentage of their sales of EVs, but that's because they have prioritized China and Europe for their sales. And we have so much demand for, like last year, they sold 16,000 ID4s in the US, and they had 40,000 people just waiting for them. This year, they have sold 11,000 ID4s in the US. So unfortunately, we are just not seeing the numbers of vehicles coming to the market. So that's why it's very important for us to tell always the manufacturers, we want the cars. We want the cars right now. So a good example of that was the Clean Cars rulemaking in Minnesota. That was very important for us to be able to get vehicles in the future to our market. Demand is not the problem. And here's a good example how that is. When JD Power asked from potential car buyers last year is, what do you think about EVs? 20% of the potential buyers said that they strongly favor EVs, which means if we are right now in 7% and 20% are saying they would definitely want to have an EV, there's a plenty of demand. There's no question about it. To add to that, 60% of the people are saying, well, I'd be very interested in EVs, but I just don't know enough. Can you tell me more? I don't know enough to make a decision one way or another. But as we know, when we educate people and they get an opportunity to experience driving EV, they are going to move in that direction. So we have 80% of the market that is either already very interested or is just wants more information. So there's no problem in increasing the sales. There's always the 20% that is strongly against everything. But guess what? I don't care. It doesn't matter if 20% of the people are against things, because they'll learn over the years that, hey, this is actually not that bad of a thing, and they will start to slowly go there, but we don't have to worry about it. We just work with those who actually want things right now, and that means that that way we can actually shift to driving electric in the transportation in a big way. Then one interesting thing is what we have heard over the years is that, well, maybe the EVs are good for the cities, but I don't think they work in rural America. And the funny thing is that actually EVs make most sense in rural America. And I have a couple of points why that is the case. Rural households use much more funds to transportation. So EVs provide a much bigger opportunity for saving when you think about it. More you drive, more you save when you think about EVs. So that is a one big thing there. We just have to educate people about this. Range used to be a problem, no question about it. When we got our first Nissan Leaf 2012, that got 73 miles of range. That worked really well in city driving, but I didn't take that car to Duluth. But now the thing has changed a lot because battery technology has improved. The batteries are much bigger. Most of the vehicles sold right now have 3 times bigger batteries than my Nissan Leaf had 2012. So average range for EVs sold in the US is over 250 miles. So range is not an issue anymore. Not at all the same way as it used to be. So for most people, that's not a problem. So that's that. Home charging is usually pretty easy to set up for these rural homes. So that's in the cities, it can be much harder. You have a small lot, you have just the electricity coming one place, you might have a limited parking and all of that. When you live in a more rural setting, you usually have more space. You can change things differently. You can park your car wherever needed, where the power is closest and so forth. So home charging is easier to set up. Households have also multiple vehicles. That provides flexibility. So if you think about you're thinking, well, I don't know if EV can do all the things that I want. I'm not sure if I should buy one. When I ask people, well, how many do you have 2 cars in your household? The answer might sometimes be, well, I have 4. I'm like, all right, well, then if you have 4 vehicles in your household, make sure that one of those is EV. You don't have to replace all of your vehicles to EVs, but get one, start driving electric, and all of a sudden you will learn that, hey, actually people in your household probably will start driving the EV the most. So you'll be competing who gets to drive that. And that'll just help you to realize how you're using cars in your life. And then at the same time, you have the other vehicles that you can use. If you need something that tows a big boat and you're not going to be getting a Ford F-150 Lightning right now, that's fine. You can keep your older truck and do the work that. So horses for courses. At the same time, it doesn't make sense to drive those big old diesel vehicles for your commuting every day. It's just not designed for that. Access to gas fueling infrastructure is limited. When we think about it, it's not that easy necessarily always to fill your gas tank. You might have to drive 5-10 miles to go to the gas station. Usually you can combine that with some of the other errands, but sometimes you just need to do extra miles to do that. And with EVs, we don't have that problem. You charge it at home every night, every morning it's full, it's much more convenient. So that is clearly another advantage there. Federal home charging incentives, and we'll talk about this more soon, are only going to be available for rural areas and low-income neighborhoods starting in the beginning of next year. So that's going to change, and that's another sign for what kind of incentives are coming. New federal funding will also increase the rural public charging infrastructure, especially the DC fast charging. So when you need to go longer and drive longer, go to places, you can do that. And of course, powering your driving with electricity is a local economy booster. First of all, you'll be saving more money. The household will have more money to spend in other things in your local economy. And then you're not paying for that electricity to oil companies anymore, where most of that will go outside of your local economy, but you'll be paying for your local utility company. Then much bigger portion of that money stays in your local economy. Definitely a good thing for a local economy. And then there are a lot of uses for vehicle to load power output features. So vehicle to load means that you can use if you have a, for example, F-150 Lightning truck, you can drive it somewhere, connect any kind of tools you want to it, and start using the electric tools and even welding equipment and stuff like that with it. Truthfully, living in a cities, I don't come up with any uses any ways that I could use this feature for myself. But if I would be living in a rural area, like I grew up in a farm, I know exactly, I would find dozens of different ways that I could use this in my life in that case. So it's a very good tool in rural America for people. So there are a couple of points here why EVs make more sense in rural America, and hopefully this will help you when you're talking with people about it. Let's go to Inflation Reduction Act then, the actual topic of today. So first thing we have to remember when we talk about this Inflation Reduction Act is that it's going to be enforced for 10 years. It starts in the beginning of next year and then stays for 10 years. Of course, there could be changes to the law, as there always is, but this is designed to be in place for 10 years. So being aware of that. There are different sections to it. There's Section 30D, that is credit for new electric vehicle, that's up to $7,500. There's a Section 25E, that is for used EVs. Then there's 45W, that is commercial vehicles, and then 30C, that is alternative fuel vehicle refueling property credit, meaning credits for charging stations. And I go into the details of each of these, but just wanted to give you an overview here. The one thing, of course, there is that different sections have different limitations and eligibility limitations. Some of them have to do with US manufacturing, some of them are proportion limits, some of them are income limits, some of them are price limits, some of them are even weight limits and vehicle age limits, and so forth. This is pretty complicated thing, the whole thing. And I won't say that I'm a total expert in this area. So when it comes to any of these, applying them in the real life, I would say talk to your tax accountants and others to get really in detail. I'm more bringing you an overview. What I think this does actually, though, is that even though it's complicated, it does help to increase the manufacturing in the US, which was part of the reason, big part of the reason how they put it together. We have seen a lot of announcements after this came public. We've seen a lot of announcements from different manufacturers that they are bringing their manufacturing in the US. So it clearly has helped, very, very clearly. So it's working in many ways right. At the same time, as I said, it can be a little complicated. But let's talk a little bit about these different sections. So Section 33 is a credit for new electric vehicles. Maximum amount for that is $7,500. It's the same amount that it used to be. It was $7,500 before the max. Earlier, it was just tied into the battery size. So it was depending on what the battery size of the vehicle is, you will get it. And if it's 16 kilowatt hours or bigger, then you get the full 7,500 tax credit for it. The other limitation there was when the manufacturer has sold 200,000 units, then the system it starts to phase out, so that that manufacturer will not have the credit available anymore for them, which was not really a fair thing if you think about it. Those who were the biggest pioneers and brought the vehicles first in the market, they would be penalized for not having the tax credit available for their buyers anymore later. I think it should be the other way around. But now that's going to be gone. So this removes the manufacturer sales caps, and this impacts Tesla and GM. Toyota was also just starting to go in the phase-out period, but it doesn't really, they were not there yet, so it doesn't have a real-life impact to them. But Tesla and GM will get will be eligible again, the buyers of those vehicles. It'll impact GM much bigger than Tesla because of some of the limits, and we can talk more about that soon. Traction battery size minimum has increased from 5 kilowatts to 7 kilowatt hours, 5 kilowatt hours to 7 kilowatt hours. Doesn't really impact anything because all of the EVs, even the plug-in hybrids, have over 7 kilowatt hour battery pack. So that's not meaningful in that way, but it's good to know. Beginning of next year, these vehicles will have to have a final assembly in North America if they want to qualify for this. So that's one thing. At the same time, right now, there are some new laws that have been proposed that would delay this about 2 years. We'll see if they actually make and will become laws. That there's a lot of discussion about clarifications and all of that, but I was just reading about the lawmakers that they are proposing a new law that would delay these 2 years, not starting this year but 2025, which would give manufacturers more time to make sure that they can comply with all of this. We'll see how that goes. Anyways, the 7,500 tax credit is split in half. Half of it is for requirements for critical mineral extraction for the battery, and then the other half is for battery components, and we'll talk about both of those more in detail next. There's also vehicle MSRP, so manufacturer suggested retail price limits for vans, for sport utility vehicles and pickup trucks. That's 80,000, and for all other vehicles it's 55,000. And then there's a buyer's annual income limits, single filer 150,000, head of household 225, and joint filers 300,000. And you can find more information from the link that is right there. But this is an example where I say that Tesla will not probably get too much boost from this one, because if you look at the vehicle MSRP limits, for most of the Teslas, that's 55,000. So their vehicles will not just qualify for this one. So only one would be the Tesla Model 3 that is starting the base model for less than that. At the same time, I think that that Model Y will be considered a small SUV, and therefore it also would qualify the base models of that. They started from 70,000, and this limit is in 80,000. So it will have some help for Tesla too, but GM will have much more models that will qualify, and many of the others. All right, let's look at these different portions here. Critical minerals requirement. And I just need to read this because otherwise there's no way for me to explain this better. So to be eligible for the 3,750 critical minerals portion of the tax credit, the percentage of the value of the battery's critical minerals that are extracted or processed in the United States or US free trade agreement partner or recycled in North America must increase according to the following schedule. So here's the schedule. Next year, 40% of the battery minerals, and that actually shouldn't say battery components, it should say critical minerals requirement, would be 40% would have to be either extracted or processed in the United States or on a US free trade agreement partner or recycled in North America. Those are the rules. And then it increases the percentage every year from that. So if we think about the battery minerals and what are the critical minerals that are in a battery, we are usually talking about cathode minerals. So minerals that are used in cathodes, and that depends on what kind of a battery technology is used, what kind of a chemistry is used in the battery. And all of the EVs use lithium-ion batteries. That's the first thing. And then here are the most commonly used chemistries in EVs. And I can first explain what are the chemistries there. I'll actually, so NMC, the first three ones there, if you start from the left there, there's NMC, 811, 523, and 622. Actually, the oldest chemistry of those, I think, was 523. Then they moved into 622, and then the latest one is 811. So that's kind of the order in a historical way there. So most of the NMC batteries that are used nowadays are 811s, and that is the most commonly used battery technology, I think, now for all, at least most of the batteries or most of the models, US models, that are vehicles that are sold in US have that. If you look at the make and model wise, by far the bigger numbers actually are NCAs, because Tesla uses NCA technology in them. And then LFP, lithium iron phosphate, is a technology that has been around for a long time, but it has been just recently, last 2 years, started to be used in EVs. And Tesla is one of the biggest users, but others are using this too. It has a less of a capacity, so therefore it hasn't been used so much in the past, but it now makes sense to use it, especially in the lower end units, and works perfectly fine. I think most of the Teslas that are, for example, sold in Europe right now have LFP technology in them. So if you look at that, lithium content is pretty similar to them. Cobalt, nickel, and manganese content depends on what kind of a chemistry you're using. And as we can see, we have moved away when you think about the NMC 523, 622, and 811. We have moved away from, or manufacturers have moved away from the technologies where they use more cobalt. They have reduced the cobalt amount in the batteries. NCA battery has even less of that, and LFP has none. So LFP doesn't use any of those. What we see there, then the graphite is mostly used in the anode side of the battery. So that's there. Aluminum and copper are carrying the energy there. So that's why there's a lot of aluminum and copper there, and then steel and iron as other elements. But these are the minerals that are mostly talked about when we think about these critical minerals. So that's a good thing for us to just understand. Then if we talk about the battery components, we're talking about all of the components in the batteries. And there's a little bit overlap probably with the critical minerals. And that's one thing that the manufacturers have asked, that could you please clarify this? Do critical minerals also, are they also part of the battery components requirement? Most likely there'll be a clarification, and I would assume that they would be separating those, that the battery components would be other than the critical minerals, but who knows? Well, we shall see. So to be eligible for this one, you have to have again, I'll just read again just to be most clear about this one. The percentage of the value of batteries components that are manufactured or assembled in North America must increase according to the following schedule. So as you can see here we are only talking about the North America manufacturing or assembly. So it doesn't say that they have to be manufactured and assembled. It's manufacturing or assembly. That's what it sounds like to me. We'll see how this will be interpreted in the future. But it starts already with 50%. So if the battery would be brought in here from somewhere else, you wouldn't be eligible. So you have to at least have an assembly in the US and then go up to 100% at 2029 and later. And if you think about the battery itself, there's a ton of things that are inside the battery. You have, in addition to the battery cells, then you have a thermal management system, you have electronics, you have a battery management system, there are electronics for that. You have the casings, you have all kinds of other things there. So it's much more complicated machine overall than just the battery components. Then if we think about going back to the portion that says that you also electric vehicles have to be assembled in North America. Right now, the government has listed the vehicles with final assembly in North America. And here's a list of those. There are some that this is the list of those that we're expecting to be manufacturers in 2023, starting from there. And you can go to the link and just find all those there. I think this is missing one vehicle, which is Volkswagen ID.4. They have started to assembly of Volkswagen ID.4 in North America this fall. So that's unfortunately not on that list, but just so you know. All right. If you want to know about basic information about all the EVs, just always go to evinfolist.com. That lists all the EVs that are right now available in the US. Where it says federal tax credit, right now we have just TBD on that one, because we really don't know what the federal tax credit will be next year. Right now, if you're thinking about buying an EV, now might not be a bad time to buy it, as long as it's assembled in the US, because this assembly is already in place. But all of these vehicles, if you buy one of these right now, if you can find one right now and you can buy it, you could get the tax credit next year. Again, it get this up to 7,500. I think most of these will get the full 7,500. Next year, they have to have the battery components and the critical minerals and all of that. So it might not be full. Maybe it's only 50% next year. So just be aware that if you're thinking about, should you wait next year, should you buy it this year? If you're thinking to buy one and you have an opportunity to find one, buy it this year. Chrysler Pacifica, one of my friends is right now thinking about Chrysler Pacifica, buying one of those. And I was like, yep, if you can find one, just buy it now. It's not a bad idea from tax credit perspective. We have another section 25E that is used EV tax credit that will be available again starting next year here. So beginning again the 10 years period, it's 30%, max $4,000. That means that any vehicle that is over $12,000 can get full $4,000 tax credit, because most of the used EVs are over $12,000 right now. We can kind of think about it as a $4,000 tax credit. Vehicle has to be at least 2 years old, and it can cost max $25,000. So this is where the pricing is between $12,000 and $25,000. You can get $4,000 back from it, assuming that your annual income limits are not more than, in single filer it's 75,000, head of household 112,500, and then joint filers 150,000. So these are I would say these are somewhat higher than what I was expecting these to be, but that's where they are. Filer is eligible to have only one credit every 3 years. So you can't just go and buy a used EV every year. It's one every 3 years. And credit can be applied to only one sale per vehicle during its lifetime. So if this vehicle is once sold next year, and then you sell it 2 years after that to someone else, then they would not be getting it. At the same time, I have to say, since these must be purchased from dealership, these are not from personal sales, don't apply. So if you would buy this from your friend, you would not get the tax credit. The vehicle has to be sold from the dealership. And the reason why they have added that is that otherwise people could sell their vehicle to their son or daughter or their relative and just kind of like keep on selling it or different places and that way get the credit. And they wanted to make sure that that doesn't happen. Anyways, they will keep a list of vehicles that have gotten the credit. So dealerships will have to confirm that this vehicle has not been sold once so that someone has gained the credit, but its credit is still available for it. So that's on dealerships and the government to figure out. And starting in 2024, this credit is transferable to the dealer at the point of sale. So buyer can say to the dealer, I would like you to take the tax credit. So can you, and by law, the dealer has to reduce that from the price of the vehicle. So they can say, well, if I take it, you get only 3,000. No, they have to give you the full 4,000. So that's in the law there. So that's coming and that'll be interesting in next year. We have a section 45W that is commercial vehicles credit. So it's available for businesses to purchase an EV or fuel cell vehicle, which not that common yet. Vehicles with gross vehicle weight rating that is below 7,000 pounds, 14,000 pounds, have to have at least 7 kilowatt-hour battery, and then bigger than that have to have at least 15 kilowatt-hour battery. Again, if it's an electric vehicle, these are not going to be limiting anyone because the batteries for sure will be much bigger than that. It's up to 30% of the cost of the vehicle. And when it's below 14,000 pounds and it's up to 7,500, when it's over 14,000 pounds, it's up to $40,000. So that's pretty good addition to these credits. So this is a new credit that will be available starting next year. Then we have the alternative fuel vehicle refueling property credit, which means credit for the charging stations. And we have had it in the past. We're familiar with it. Used to be 30% of installation cost up to $1,000. It has kind of been reinstated many times. So we've had it almost the last 10 years, almost in every year available. So it's 30% of installation cost for homeowners up to $1,000, and for commercial properties is up to 30%. $30,000. So that's how it has been in the past. But the next year, starting the portion, well, for rules for the post portions change, but especially for commercial, then there will be a 30% of tax credit of the cost, or 6% in the case of property is if it's depreciated, and it's not to exceed 100,000. That's what the rules are. When is the property subject of depreciation? That is for tax lawyers to tell you how the properties they are depreciating and all of that. I can't say anything about it, but that's why companies need to talk with that. But there are also some other rules here. So to be eligible, the equipment must be installed in a location that meet the following census tract requirements: population census tract where the poverty rate is at least 20%, or metropolitan and non-metropolitan area census tract where the median family income is less than 80% of state's median family income levels, and eligible projects must also meet apprenticeship and prevailing wage requirements. As you can see, this can be a little bit complicated in many ways, and that's why if you're working in a project like this, make sure that the tax professionals are involved so they can take a look at it and say, all right, well, in this project, we could consider this, or we shouldn't be considering it. So those are the things to think there. Reminding people about the charging again, most of the charging happens at home. If people have charging at home, that is by far the most common way to power your driving, because it's the most affordable and most convenient way to do it. That's what it is. Workplace charging will probably play a role there, and public charging is important for us to provide us, for example, long distance driving and range flexibility, but it's much smaller portion of this charging. My wife, for example, has driven now 10 years with electric cars, and she has never used a public charging station. I use public charging stations only when I drive long trips. And long trips for me, for example, doesn't mean that I drive from Twin Cities to St. Cloud and back. That's not a long trip. Or if I drive from here to Mankato and back, I'm still charging all of that at home. But if I drive from Twin Cities to Duluth, then I need to use a public charging. So just giving you examples of, in my case, for example, what it looks like. So I don't do that too often, but I'm most likely going to be driving to Duluth on Monday, so then I will be using public charging station on that trip. And reminder of how we do the charging, how does that work? So every car comes with the level 1 cord set, so you can use that, but we are limited how much power we can pull out of the outlet. So this works well if you drive 30 miles or less in a day. If you drive more than 30 miles, then I would recommend go to level 2 charging stations. So then there's the white one, there is one that you use tone. The taller unit there, it would be a unit that you would see more in the public spaces. And then the fastest way to charge your car is using the DC fast charging stations. And these we use 20 to 40 minutes when we drive long distances to keep going. This is what we used to install. We used to have just one unit with a couple of cords, and that's that. That does not cut anymore. This is not what the DC fast charging looks like in the future. DC fast charging in the future looks like this, where you have a site where there's multiple charging stations in the same location, and so we have a redundancy and just more of those units there available to make sure that they are available. Because challenge is right now when we start to have sites where there's just 1 or 2 cords there available, people start to wait. And if something goes south and one of the cords is broken or something like that, then you can't use that. Whereas when you have multiple cords and multiple dispensers at one site, then the things start to work. And that's what we have seen, for example, with Tesla supercharging stations and other DC fast charging sites will look more like that in the future. When you think about the public charging, I just want to remind you that if you think about the different levels, if you think about level 1 somewhere, it's minimum of 8 hours that you need for it. And there's also some limits to it. I would use level 1 only in some workplace charging setups. Elsewhere, you use either DC fast charging level 2. And the dwell time there is a key here. If you're measuring the person's dwell time in that location in hours, then level 2 is a good option for you. If the dwell time is measured in minutes, then it should be DC fast charging. That's just a rough idea when you think about some public locations, like what kind of charging infrastructure we should put there. I would just use the dwell time as the first thing to think there. If people are there for hours, level 2. If they're there for minutes, DC fast charging. US Department of Transportation has actually put together a very good toolkit for planning and funding rural electric mobility infrastructure. It's called Charging Forward. I would highly recommend looking into that because it has a lot of good information there. So check that out. And those were my slides. So now we have the Q&A portion of today, and you can find, just want to give you one more resource. We have put together this mnevbuyer.com website where you can find the basic information about the EVs and charging and so forth. So that's one resource for you. But now we could go into questions. So Lee, if you want to, for example, read some of the questions that we have in the chat, we could start with that if there are some, and then we could go if anyone wants to ask questions beyond that.
Yes, I will.
Excellent.
I'm going through that. Brian Strube asks, these are great facts. How do we get people to afford the EV at time of purchase? That seems like the biggest current barrier.
Yeah, that's called financing. People do financing for all the vehicles. It's not different for EVs, is to do that. New vehicles are always expensive. Right now, average new vehicle sales price is 45,000. I remember just a few years ago, we were talking about like 32,000 being the average sale price of new vehicle. Now we are talking about 45,000. So that has increased quite rapidly. So it's totally real right now to say that it's beyond most of the people's capability to buy a new vehicle. At the same time, that's why we need to buy more new EVs so that we can get used EVs. The only way we can get used EVs is to for people to buy new EVs. And overall total cost of ownership with EVs is always lower. EVs have been the smart move already for the last 5 years, and they still continue to be so, and even increasingly so. So even if the purchase price is higher over the lifetime of the vehicle, it'll be cheaper to own and drive. So it's if you can find a way to finance it, try to do that, because it is overall better decision for it. And again, if you can buy a new vehicle, buy a new EV, because we need more of those on the road, so that they can become used EVs, and then someone else can actually take advantage of them too.
So how do people find used EVs, Jukka?
Right now, there are quite a bit of the dealers have actually started to sell used EVs too. There are some, like I saw some, was it Lexus or Infinity in Bloomington is now specializing in selling used Teslas. They have realized that that's a good market opportunity for that. We have a used EV specific dealership in Twin Cities in Hopkins called GS Motors. So definitely check them out. gsmotors.us is their website. So see what they have available. It's like finding any EV. You can look at Facebook Marketplace. You can look at cars.com, Carsu, and checking that out. And sometimes being part of the Minnesota EV owners group is not bad either, because sometimes people are like, hey, I have this used EV that I'm just upgrading to something else, and I'd be happy to sell it first to see if one of our members would like to get it. So sometimes you get the first tips through that way. So being networked doesn't hurt.
Yeah, I noticed there's also a EV owners group out of Rochester. They seem to be pretty active.
Yeah.
Let's see other questions. Let's see. I read that this is from Jody Dansingberg. I read that Toyota is on the verge of a major breakthrough in their battery technology. Do you have any information about this?
Don't hold your breath on that one. They have been talking about this for years. Unfortunately, Toyota has been, I mean, in general, about major breakthroughs in battery technology, I stopped listening to those in 2012 because none of those actually turned out to be right. And I was like, okay, when I can drive one, then I start believing. So don't hold off doing anything because you think there's something better coming. There really, the likelihood of that happening is very, very low. So that's how it is. And these talks have been come from Toyota and other manufacturers and all of that. So nothing new there in that way. Toyota's case is a little challenging that way, that they want to own the hybrid marketplace. They are very strong in a hybrid, so they want to keep doing that. They want to milk that cow as long as they can. And they have been even poo-pooing EVs in the past. They're saying, "Oh no, I don't think it's a good idea. It's better to stay in the hybrids and all of that." And I don't like Toyota much because of that. They have not been doing many favors for overall for us. Someone actually, Toyota actually just got into, there was a list of of companies that are slowing down the progress in sustainability, and Toyota actually made that list like top 10. because of their efforts to slow down the process. So not a very good moves. So I wouldn't put any value to that. Toyota makes excellent cars, no question about it. And their prime vehicles, the plug-in hybrids, are really good vehicles. They just don't bring those into the market in any real numbers, and that's just sad. So that would be my say about that.
Mhm. And Jody Dancingberg also asks, do you think EV manufacturers are raising the price of their vehicles in an amount roughly equal to the tax credits?
No, not really. They have this is not a new thing. This has been around. It's a competitive marketplace. Right now, the demand is higher than the supply. So it's a seller's market all the time. So we have to just be aware of that. They don't have any need to do that necessarily because they have plenty of buyers. So it is definitely helping the buyers in that way. I'm hoping that we'll start to see more production, so that we will have more vehicle availability, and then we could actually get that. But these don't change the marketplace from what it has been. The only changes would be for GM and Tesla. And Tesla has been increasing their prices for the last 2 years anyways, very rapidly, and they haven't had any tax credit available. So it's just the market forces are bigger thing here than the tax credits are.
Yeah. You know, on that commentary, I just got back from California, and I'm always amazed when I go there, at least to the areas where I go, that so many EVs, so many Teslas, and that's the future. So
yeah, California is right now 18% of the vehicles sold in California, EVs.
Yeah.
And of course, Tesla is 70% of that.
Yes.
Because they just have the best availability. So that's where we are.
So Lou Schwarzkopf asks, are the lithium, cobalt, and nickel in batteries currently being recycled at the end of the battery's life?
If they are in EVs, they definitely are. They're first reused in the batteries, are reused, and then they're recycled because those are bigger units, and they're easy to recycle, very valuable materials. Nothing will go into landfill from those. I'm much more concerned about these cell phones and laptops and others, where we have the same kind of batteries, and many of them actually have a higher cobalt and nickel and manganese content than what EV batteries do. And right now, many of these just stay at people's home because there's no good recycling system for them. So if you have good ideas, if anyone has good ideas how to increase the recycling rate of our laptop batteries and our cell phone batteries, that'd be extremely valuable thing because that would bring more materials into the thing. Recycling companies are ready for it. That's not an issue. There's plenty of recycling companies that can do it. The issue is making sure that people would actually bring them somewhere so that they could be recycled. That's the biggest thing.
Well, I know that Best Buy will take any of those, without charge. And if you have an Apple phone, they will take it back without charge for recycling. And many of the major, cellular carriers do the same. So there's no reason not to return it to somebody, your computer or your cell phone, because they'll take it.
Yeah,
So,
I'm hoping that someone throws some kind of incentives, even $5
sure,
per phone would
Yeah.
just totally change the whole thing. It's like, oh, I have 6 of these phones at my house. That would be $30. Boy, I'll have to take these someday there. That would totally change the whole thing.
well, if we created a deposit, say, for every cell phone or computer purchase,
Yeah,
that
yeah,
went into a fund that would be returned to buyers when they return them.
yeah, that would be very, very good move.
Yeah. So John Howard of Winona asks, I see that Toyota PHEVs are not assembled in North America. So will they lose their credit beginning in 2023?
Yep, if they are not assembled here, they will not have the credit available at that point.
Yeah. And Jody Swanson asks, for long-range charging, are there any EV models which are more attractive due to availability of fast chargers they can access? Or can all the models access all of the fast chargers out there?
Yeah. Here, Tesla has very clear advantage because Tesla has invested a lot of money into their own supercharging networks that other manufacturers unfortunately have not done in the past. So they have the best availability of charging. There's no question about it right now. At the same time, the federal funds that are coming to NEVI and other things, there's $7.5 billion going in next 5 years to the charging infrastructure will help everybody because that will fund non-Tesla charging infrastructure. And Tesla will also slowly start to open up some of the charging infrastructure to others too. So we are seeing more and more development there that the playing field will be more level. Right now, if you think that, oh, I'm doing a ton of long distance driving all the time, then Tesla is the best choice for you. There's no question about it.
Yeah. And I've run into several people who've driven between, say, Minnesota and California or Minnesota and Colorado and have had no issues. And people,
Yeah.
I have a friend who drove from Washington all the way to Washington State, all the way to Wisconsin. But mainly he went through Canada, which has more charging stations. So,
yeah.
Are there any, this is some Sabri Fair, are there any EV companies or models in Europe or Asia that aren't in the US market yet, but that would be a strong competitor for US manufacturers?
There are a ton of those vehicles, makes and models. There are much bigger number of the vehicles that are available in those markets. Which of those would be big competitors here? I don't know. But I mean, just give you one small example. Volkswagen has their ID3 that is smaller than ID4, but still decent size, small everyday car. I would see a ton of market for something like that. It's like a Volkswagen Golf, the same kind of thing. There would be plenty of buyers, but they're not bringing them into the US market. Just as one example, but there's a ton of others very similar to that. So we unfortunately are not always getting all the models here in the US. At the same time, what it will be good for us in the US is that now the pickup trucks, electric pickup trucks are coming into the market. And those are, of course, more of a US phenomenon. There's none of those are available in Europe right now. But if you think about that, we have a Ford with the Lightning that they have already, F-150 Lightning that they are already providing to the market. They stopped taking reservations for that car a year ago when they had 200,000 reservation holders already. So this year they have probably, I don't remember the exact number. We are talking about less than 15,000 people units that they have been able to manufacture so far and provide sold to the customers. So they still have 185,000 people waiting for their F-150 Lightning right now. And when anyone gets a chance to drive that vehicle, if they have any need for that kind of pickup truck, they're like, yep, I want one of these because they're so great vehicles. So that just tells you something about the demand of these. And those are changing a lot of hearts and minds when people get to experience that. We have 5 different EV models. Chevy is coming with their Silverado EV, the pickup truck models. Rivian is already selling their vehicles here in the US. We have Hummer EV pickup truck. We have GMC coming with theirs. And then, of course, the Tesla Cybertruck that kind of started this movement. I don't necessarily like the Cybertruck design, but it doesn't matter at all because 1.3 million people have a reservation for Tesla Cybertruck. So means that there are plenty of people who would be buying one. So when Tesla gets the Cybertruck production moving, probably next year, that's what it looks like. They have no shortage of finding people to drive those. And that's going to be also very, very cool when we start to see something that I would say exotic in some, especially in some rural areas. People are like, what is that? I mean, that looks really funky machine. I would never buy one of those. But then some people tell them, well, you could consider a Ford F-150 Lightning is also electric. That's available. Then they would be like, oh, well, I could consider a Ford F-150 if that's available. So we have to throw people so far in the deep end sometimes for them to consider some of these things. So that's why I think that'll be very, very good for our market overall.
Yeah. By the way, the chief designer on the GMC pickup trucks is a Minnesota State Mankato graduate, Josh Tavel, who before that was working at Chevy Bolt. And if you look on, I turn on the TV in the morning, get the news, and half the car ads are for electric vehicles, even though they're not available, which is very interesting.
Yeah, the new Halo cars from many of the manufacturers.
Yeah. So Bill Sirks asks, says, this is really helpful. If you were thinking of making a deposit on an EV in 2023, is there a new model that you'd particularly consider buying, an SUV or a passenger car?
I don't know. I like many of the options that are right now out on the market myself. Of course, these are usually I don't like to say which cars I like, because some people might exactly not like those cars for because it's so personal choice or what you think. But for example, for me right now, and this is, by the way, a good thing, is like when you say that if you want to buy an EV, it's good to just go and order one. Just whatever you like, just order that one. And if you happen to find something else in the meantime, you can go that, but at least you have something coming sooner or later for you. That's definitely a good move to do. And in Europe, most of the vehicles actually there are sold based on orders. People just go there, test drive something, and then they order the car. It might take 8 weeks before they get it, but they're fine with it because they exactly get exactly the car that they want, right color, right interior, right trim levels, and so forth. But I'll give a couple of examples of the cars that I would consider right now. If you want something very affordable, I would go with the Chevy Bolt, starting with 27,000. That's a pretty darn good price for new EV in that way. I like the Volkswagen ID4 a lot. It's just, I like the styling. I like how it rides. It's just a very, very nice car. I definitely have not liked Volkswagen design in the past because I've considered it way too traditional. But nowadays with Volkswagen ID4, I like the design too. So that's great. I would look at the Hyundai Ioniq 5 and Kia EV6. Those have been getting rave reviews. My brother just got the Kia EV6 in Finland, and I drove that. Excellent car. Both of those, they are kind of like sister models. They're totally different looking cars though, and they drive also differently, so they're not exactly the same, but definitely both of them find their fans. Polestar would be another one that I would definitely look into. Polestar 2 is the vehicle that is on the market right now, and we are in a lucky situation that we have a Polestar dealership here in Minnesota. It's at Borton Volvo. They have their new showroom right in a mall very close by. But basically, they do the service and everything at Borton Volvo here in Twin Cities by 394. But it's interesting that they were able to get the dealership here, and there was only 18 other dealerships in the whole US. So next closest to this is in Colorado, and the other way in Detroit. There's not even a Polestar dealership in Chicago, but we have one here. And because of that, they actually can get the units. So if you want an EV, they have actually some available at the lot, so you might be able to get it soon. That's a good thing about it. An excellent, very, very nice car. I've had an opportunity to drive them. Ford Mustang Mach-E, I like it a lot. Availability has been really, really hard, so definitely something that you need to order. There's nothing right now available at the dealerships. Those are some of the vehicles that I would consider right off the bat when thinking about this.
When I've been reading that Volkswagen has had some issues with its electronics on its electric vehicles. Have those problems been fixed on the ID.4?
They have had challenges with their software development. Traditional manufacturers have not been a software developers in the past. Now they have realized, oh boy, we have to start to be a software company too. So they have been much slower in that process, and those have been the things. But they haven't really had a huge issue in the thing. Like it might be just that your user interface is a little buggy. There might be something like that. But they can update those over the air, so you will get the updates for those. And my sister and and her husband have a Volkswagen ID.4, and I haven't heard them complaining about it. So I'm assuming that it's fine in that way.
Yeah. Do they have a all-wheel drive or a rear-wheel drive ID.4?
Yeah, the ID.4 is all-wheel drive available. It is also rear-wheel drive. So depending on the model, if I remember right there, but I know. The interesting thing about EVs is that most of them are available as all-wheel drives because it's so much easier to make all-wheel drive with electric motors. You put one motor in front and one motor in back, and you have a four-wheel drive. Whereas with the traditional ones, you have to have a extensive drivetrains there to do that, and it's much more expensive. So therefore, most of the EVs on our list, I think like 70% of the vehicles that are at the EV info list are available in all-wheel drive.
Yeah. So on the same subject of reliability, John Howard asks, have issues with Chevy Bolt batteries been resolved? Was that only for certain model years?
It was for all the Chevy Bolts that they had manufactured at that time. So there was a recall, and they're getting new batteries for those. I have not heard that there would have been any problems with the new batteries. At the same time, battery manufacturing is still the hardest part of this. So I don't think that everybody has received their new batteries yet, but I think most of the people have. So I think it's mostly resolved in that way, and I haven't heard any problems with the new batteries. So I would consider it resolved in that way.
Yeah, I've heard the same thing. Nate Johnson asks, do Minnesota's cold winters have such a negative effect on battery range as some say?
They do have a negative impact on batteries. There's no question about it. So if you have a vehicle that gets new EV that gets 250 miles of range in a just a normal everyday average, in the coldest winter days, maybe you get 170, 180 miles of range. As long as you're aware of it, that's fine. Then you can deal with it. At the same time, EVs make really excellent winter cars. They're the best choices for winter cars for many reasons. First of all, most of them are available at all-wheel drive. Second of all, they have heat pump heating system. So with traditional cars, you have to wait for the internal combustion engine to heat up before you get any heat into the cabin. With EVs, no need for waiting. It starts heat very soon after you start driving. So usually it's like 1 or 2 blocks. When I leave home, I start to get warm air from the channels. So it's very fast. And then you can use your preheating functions in these vehicles. So like you can see behind me, there's our garage in there, and that's a cold garage. I don't have any heating to it. But we can keep our EVs inside that. And when my wife, for example, was going every day to work, she had set up the timer in the car so that 7:20 in the morning when she goes in the car is waiting for her so that the interior is hot, her seat is hot, and even her steering wheel is hot. So it's pretty luxurious right from there on. And you can do this at home in your closed garage because there's no emissions. Don't try this at home with your internal combustion engine car. The results are not going to be good. So that's a big difference there, that you can do the heating and have a warm car always. And then when she was leaving from work back to home, she just took her cell phone out and just told the car, could you please heat yourself up? And 5 to 10 minutes after that, she walks in the car and it's waiting for her there, warm again. So there's no need to drive with a cold car anymore when you're driving an EV. It's much better driving experience in the winter time. And plus, when you have a digital control now for your electric motors, you can adjust the power that you're putting into tires much more precisely. So when you're leaving from a spot that is very slippery, you just feather the accelerator pedal just a little bit, and car starts to slowly creep forward and get you forward from there. Whereas with the traditional cars, it's much harder to do that kind of a precise thing. So you can't take advantage of all the traction there is. So my choice always in a winter car is EV, definitely for all these reasons.
And do you mind telling us what EVs you own?
Well, we have in the back of that here, you can see the Nissan Leaf. There we have the 2013 Nissan Leaf. That's it's 9 years old now. It had originally 73 miles of range. It still has 84% of the battery capacity left. So it's pretty good performance, I think, from a car of that age. Then I drive a Tesla Model S right now myself. That is 2015. So it's 7 years old. It has 100,000 miles on it, and it has 90% of the battery life left. And then my wife has a Tesla Model 3 that is 4 years old, turning to, a little over 4 years old right now. And that one still has definitely over 90% of the battery left there. So they seem to be doing pretty well, especially when you look at our older cars.
Mm-hmm. Kitty Wortel asks, if a vehicle received the $7,500 tax credit when purchased new, can it still get the $4,000 tax credit on first used car sale?
As far as I understand, yes.
Mm-hmm. And Sabri Fair asks, I know one of the big selling points for EVs is that there's less maintenance, but I'm wondering if there are now auto shops that specialize in servicing them, or that work still has to be done at dealerships. Also, are there EV service training opportunities for auto mechanics who are trained on ICE vehicles?
Yeah, the biggest, first of all, there are some shops that are starting to specialize more on EVs, but definitely we want all the dealers to be very good at this too. So training all the mechanics that are interested in it is a good thing. I would say that with EVs, when it comes to the service things, basic maintenance items are very simple. Any electrician, any mechanic can do those. We're talking about the tire rotation, tire work. We are replacing suspension parts, and if something breaks, mechanical things and so forth. More advanced things have to do with some of the electric systems, and that is actually not that different from any other current vehicles. What you need to do, the skill set you need to have is be very good with diagnostics. So as long as you can use the diagnosis systems that manufacturers provide to diagnose where the problem is, then you will be replacing parts after that. You won't have to open up the boxes, the inverter, and fix something inside it. That's not done. It's just replace the whole thing. When it comes to batteries, there are some manufacturers who have a system options that you can open up the battery, replace some of the modules. Those are pretty rare. You don't do that very often. It's pretty rare operation that happens. And for example, and I think more and more the manufacturers will do it so that you just replace the battery with something that is like a refurbished battery, and that will be sent some other places to be done that. So you don't have to go inside the battery. That depends on the manufacturer by manufacturer. But again, the most important skill that mechanics need to have is diagnostics. And this is not different from when I used to teach mechanics when I was working for Ford in the 90s. The highest level of mechanics knowledge was that if they are good with diagnostics. It hasn't changed a bit. We're exactly the same way. Diagnostics is the key. And that's why I'm saying when I speak to some of the mechanics who are studying to become students who are studying to become mechanics, I was like, if you want three most important things that you can learn is diagnostics, and diagnostics, because that will make you an ace in that business.
Right. Nate Johnson asks, do you have ideas on how to improve the reliability of DC fast chargers?
The new systems that are coming out now are much more reliable. We have been right now using the first generation units that manufacturers were still kind of learning how to make reliable systems. In many cases, they were overly complicated systems. Nowadays, the new ones are much more simple. It's much easier to replace the parts if something goes wrong. It's much easier to diagnose them. Those are the key pieces there. And then, of course, reliability-wise, the other thing is that we have to have the redundancy at the locations. So we just don't have one unit there, but we have 5 or 6 units. And then if one of them is not working, the others still most likely will be. And that will help with the reliability.
Sure. Well, I see our time is up, and I don't see any more questions in the chat. If there are final words, Jukka, that you want to give to us, and people have questions, can they contact you?
Yeah, I think I've spoken enough today. my suggestion to people is just enjoy. If you don't own an EV yet, start to do shopping, have fun with it, enjoy the process, go test drive different things, see which ones you like, and just it's kind of like what I say also for buying a house. It's just like spend time with it. Have an enjoyable process with it. It's the same with EVs. And when you start to find something that you really like, just go order one. You still have to wait probably for a few weeks or months before you can get one. But at least you have an order in. It doesn't mean that you have to stop the purchase process there. You can still keep window shopping after that. But that's a fun thing in life. You can actually look into your options, do your research, and figure out what works well for you. That's at least that's my favorite thing of doing this. Always learning more, doing the research and homework, and then figuring out what works best.
Okay, so Jukka's presentation will be on our website, and you will send it to us, I hope. And
yeah,
slides, and also the recording will be on our website. We've had some issues in the past with it disappearing, but I think hopefully we'll be able to get more permanent recording capability. So it'll be up on the website for a while. Thank you, Jukka. It's been great. And keep up the good work. And again, if people want to learn more, they can just contact you through Fresh Energy, right?
Yeah, and also join the Minnesota EV Owners Group. That's always a good way to talk with many of the owners. You don't have to rely on me. Talk with the owners who actually drive ID4 or drive a Mustang Mach-E or whatever car you're interested in, because they have much more knowledge than I do about those.
So, okay. Well, thanks, everybody.
Right.
See you in January. Okay.
Will do.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Jukka. Appreciate it.